A woman falls on hard times. She desperately wants help, reaches out to family. Then she is kidnapped, raped, and tortured, but manages to escape and ultimately put her rapist behind bars. Not long after this, as he is in prison serving his sentence, the woman goes missing, and her family, one of whom you will hear from, stops at nothing to find answers. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It was the summer of 1985, Washington State, Aberdeen. Susan Marable is 29 years old. For a time, Susan and her family are living in Seattle, and Susan's younger sister, Robyn, would often go and hang out at the house Susan rented from her parents. None other than Kurt Cobain, Nirvana's frontman, singer-songwriter, lived next door. Robyn knew Kurt and had gone to school with him. During those early years, Susan would see Kurt outside, playing his guitar or just sitting, and she'd make him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a glass of cold milk, bring it over, and have a little chat. Those were the more happier days. Seattle in 1985 was just beginning to show rapid expansion within the high-tech industry sector, drawing lots of people from all over the world into the city. Of course, the grunge music scene, in which Kurt Cobain and his band would eventually take control of, was still some years away. But heavy metal acts such as Queensryche and Metal Church, Soundgarden were gaining popularity and building big audiences. For Susan and Robyn, along with their 4 other siblings, they had all grown up in what was a normal, stable childhood. Their mom stayed at home with all the kids while dad taught U.S. and world history as well as sociology at Weatherwax Senior High School. A few years before this, in 1982, Susan first experiments with drugs, and honestly, not by her own choice. She had been dating a doctor for a short time. Over at his house one night, he gives her a pill, mentioning how she should take it and it'll make her feel really good. The next day, Susan broke up with the guy, saying that after taking the drug, she was unable to walk, which of course did not allow her to leave his house by her own will. And God knows what this guy did to her while she was out. I mean, I'm just going to say it like it is right there. This incident scared her. She had lost all control of her faculties. Susan had never messed around with anything besides some weed and drinking some beers, so the idea of taking a little pill and being subjected to handing herself completely over to the man who had given it to her was not at all the good time she was chasing. By that summer of 1985, Susan had been romantically linked with a local weed dealer. Been with him for a number of years, loved the man, and both had done time in prison after he was busted for selling marijuana in large quantities. When they got out, Susan made the choice to stay with him. It was weed, after all. It felt as though all of Seattle was smoking weed. What was the big deal? Big deal was, at the time, it was against the law. On an unusually hot August night for Seattle, Susan and her boyfriend decide to go to the Grays Harbor County Fair. It's about 5 p.m. Post-release from prison, Susan is still living at home. She wants to be with the guy, but living in the same house, right at that moment, she is uncertain of based on what happened. So she waits. Her boyfriend drops her off at the family home that evening of the fair so she can grab her car and meet him a little later. They kiss, hug. Susan steps out of his vehicle and runs inside her family home as he takes off. As Susan is freshening up, her sister Robyn is on the back porch with her boyfriend just sitting, enjoying the evening. At some point, they are startled by the sound of sirens blaring off in the distance. It's loud, and there seems to be a lot of emergency vehicles heading in the same direction. 30 minutes go by and the sirens are but a memory. Then the phone rings, so Robyn's boyfriend answers. Outside still, Robyn hears what she described to me as a wail, a loud cry. And soon, her boyfriend appears, and he is shaken to his core and crying. "What is it?" Robyn asks. "Where's your mom?" he says. "Inside." "That was the hospital. There's been a fatal accident." The hospital wouldn't tell him who, only to get over there as soon as they could. By this time, Susan had already left in her own car for the fair. So they are thinking the worst. When Robyn and Susan's mother heard what happened, she calls the hospital, and they tell her that Susan's boyfriend had been killed in the accident. When they arrive at the hospital, Susan is on the floor in the fetal position, sobbing, hugging herself. Robyn sits down and Susan then crawls on the floor over to her. She couldn't even stand up. She is completely broken. She loved this man. For the next year, things spiral. As if that accident placed some sort of curse on Susan. She struggles enormously with the loss and grief. By 1986, a close family member who had been using hard drugs most of his life introduces Susan to what was a popular drug around Seattle during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, heroin. A surefire way to numb all of that emotional pain and forget about life. Drift away into pink clouds and a warm fuzziness where nothing in the world can harm you. For Susan, hurting so badly, unable to put her pain anywhere, it was not a question, should I try it, but where do I sign up? Of course, with that sort of drug, which is a relentless, devious, devilish con artist, it puts a chokehold on users and, once its talents sink into you, becomes nearly impossible to free yourself from. And Robyn and Susan's family begin to see Susan go through this metamorphosis and turn into someone they will soon not recognize. Not long after, Susan meets a new man, and within a year, she is pregnant and has given birth to a daughter. This gave Susan the inspiration to shake off the monkey on her back and become a mother. The father of the child, Robyn says, was an abusive creep, and Susan got herself and her child away from him. Susan moves in with her family and into an in-law apartment in the basement. Robyn and her mother are living upstairs. Continually working toward kicking her habit, Susan stumbles. When she disappears on a binge, Robyn and her mother take care of the child. So Susan has kind of a cushion there, perhaps ingrained in the back of her mind that she can screw up and it will not affect her child because there was always someone around to pick up the pieces. Honestly speaking, I know this pain. My oldest brother was swallowed up into the same abyss and never came back. He lived with me, staying in my basement. He had children himself, and I could tell the same story Robyn is describing for me. It's a cycle you are wound up tight in, desperately wanting the person to get clean, loving that person, knowing the chances of them doing so are slim if you are honest about the situation. My brother was 47 years old when he died. It tears your insides apart to watch this unfold before your eyes, and there is nothing you can do. That drug tells them what to do, when, for how long, when to sleep, eat, shit, commit crimes, etc. They have no control whatsoever over themselves. The mind and body have surrendered to the drug. Susan is a beautiful woman, brown eyes, long and flowing brown hair, parted distinctly down the middle, and she is very petite, just a tad over 5 feet tall, about 100 pounds. She has this wholesome, even bright school teacher kind of innocent look about her. She is not the cliched image we often think about, perhaps judgingly, when we bring heroin into a conversation. I mean, if any of you have ever had any experience with a heroin addict, they can maintain a look that makes you question whether they are using or not. And heroin and addiction does not discriminate, race or class. I want to bring Robyn into the conversation now, so you can hear from her the events with which happen next. Because as Susan sinks deeper into her addiction and decides to make a move to Yakima, Washington, away from her family, a series of events begin to take shape that will eventually bring us to why this missing person case is so different and, at the same time, so important for us to hear. Because I think there is an answer out there waiting to be found in this one. Why don't we take our first break here, and when we return, meet Robyn Peery, Susan's sister, who has been a candid, tenacious spokesperson for the family and has spent her entire adult life searching for the answers she knows somebody has in her sister's disappearance. Be right back. When I mentioned before the break a series of events leading up to Susan's disappearance, it begins when Susan, struggling once again with her addiction, loses custody of her child. As you might imagine, something as traumatic as being told you are not capable of taking care of your child can set off one of two behaviors. You clean up and work toward reestablishing a relationship with the child, or you spiral further downward to kill the pain of not seeing your child. And neither is an easy road. So Susan decides to try the geographical approach to getting clean.
Yakima is a town in eastern Washington, so it's on the east side of the Cascade Range. Seattle is on the west side of the Cascade Range, so that's the dividing line. Yakima is also agriculture. I mean, Washington apples, cherries, peaches, you name it. Everything is there.
Aberdeen, where Susan had lived most of her life, is along the Pacific coastline. Yakima, over 200 miles inland, east, a 4-hour drive away. With all of the agriculture in Yakima, maybe Susan wanted a fresh start in a new place where she could find work. But Robyn learns differently, and that perhaps the real reason Susan decides to head to Yakima is the drug culture.
I don't know how she got to Yakima, Washington. I don't know if someone told her that Yakima is an easy place to, make money and get drugs, because at the time, late 80s and into the early 90s, Yakima, Washington was the pipeline into the United States for heroin and cocaine, because the cartel had little airplanes coming in and all those, there's so many acres of land out there. So these little planes can come land in an orchard somewhere way out. And then apparently they had some distribution center areas of their own. And then they have these migrant farm workers. So the stuff was so easy to get. So however she heard about it, I don't know. But that's where she ended up in 1990. And she let my mom know, when she got there, that, hey, I'm over here. I just felt like it was easier if I left because I'm hurting you guys, and my sisters are ashamed of me, and I've lost Rebecca. I'm in a lot of emotional pain, and I'm just going to stay here for a while. So,
before the move, the family had been forced to sit by and watch Susan's life implode with the feeling of not being able to do anything about it. Not long after Susan arrives in Yakima, not having any money, she resorts to what many women do in order to feed their addiction. Susan starts to frequent one particular place. And soon after this new, dark world she is involved in now begins, something tragic happens.
June 10th, 1990, she was out, I believe, behind this tavern called the Sports Center Tavern. And out behind this tavern in the alley, I guess was a common place for some of the women who were sex workers at the time would go out there and pick up dates. And so she agreed to go with this guy, John Robinson. And at some point during this interaction, he takes her way out. I think it's on River Road somewhere. There's so many desolate areas out there. And when he gets her out there, he tapes her up, tapes her wrists, tapes her ankles. He puts on like a black leather vest. I don't know if this is part of him turning into character. I don't know what. She wrote on the back of an envelope, and I have it with my stuff. She wrote what happened, that he puts on this black leather vest after he taped me. I asked him for a cigarette because she's trying to stall. She knows, something bad's coming. He rapes her. He told her he might kill her, or he might take her to a family cabin and make her have his babies. He chokes her quite a few times, I guess, almost to where she's almost unconscious. Makes her perform oral sex. Just, hours of this stuff.
Susan was able to somehow get through this violent, sadistic ordeal inside John Robinson's car, way out in the boonies, with seemingly no one around, and actually escape from his clutches.
Well, what happened is, I can't even believe that she managed to keep her frame of mind, but apparently she saw up the road a ways a car that was stuck in the mud, which is crazy. This is Yakima. It doesn't even rain there. A car is stuck in the mud. And this guy, John Robinson, apparently he got out of his car to do something. I don't know what. She sees this car. So she, while she's taped, manages to lift the lock, because it's a big old boat kind of car with the big locks. And she gets the door open and flings herself out onto the ground and starts screaming. And so these guys came running. John Robinson jumps in his car and just takes off. So these guys took her to the sheriff's department there in Yakima. They interviewed her. She didn't go to the hospital. I've read some of the interview, and they're just describing her as, known prostitute. She seemed really out of it. I'm like, she was just raped. She was brutalized. She was almost murdered. And she's escaped. She's traumatized right now. She's in serious trauma. And they're blaming her because they're saying, she starts to kind of nod off. It's like almost 7 o'clock in the morning by now. So she's been with this guy for hours.
If you are a longtime listener, you might guess what I will say next. And yet change can sometimes come out of repetition. So I will continue to say it. It does not matter what Susan did to earn money. It doesn't matter what lifestyle she chose to live. She is the victim of a brutal crime, and yet she is judged from the moment she enters that police station. She is almost literally blamed for putting herself in a precarious position. And this is the ignorance, incompetence, and prejudice of some law enforcement, the utter lack of empathy for the human condition. That being said, the fact that they view Susan as someone who brought this upon herself and show no sense of respect or dignity, I will say, plays an unintentional role in her later disappearance. And there is nobody who could convince me otherwise. Because had law enforcement done their job, treated her with dignity and respect every human being deserves in Susan's circumstance, treated her as the victim of a violent crime, and sought out her perpetrator at all costs, the course of her life might have been different. Remember, Susan is traumatized by the loss of her child, for letting her family down, and for not being able to kick a habit. Now she's a torture and rape victim. John Robinson is later arrested, and Susan decides not to allow him, despite how much law enforcement refused to help her in any way, as a victim, to get away with what he did.
She did ultimately go to court and testified against him. And apparently there was another woman who was supposed to go to court and she backed out at the last minute. She wouldn't go. She was too afraid.
Robinson is ultimately convicted in Susan's rape and kidnapping and sentenced to 6 years in prison. 6 years.
And when he was supposed to be released, then the state of Washington committed him to McNeil Island in the Sexually Violent Predators Unit.
All of this leads up to a critical point in Susan's story, and one cannot help but think has something to do with what later happens. Now, I want to say here, Susan did not tell her family about the rape or the trial until after it was all over, which I will get to in a minute. But after Robyn finds out, she stays in touch with the state of Washington about John Robinson's status. So Robyn wanted to be certain that this piece of shit, this worthless human being who doesn't deserve a place in society, stays behind bars for as long as possible. He will reoffend. Guys like Robinson, you can almost read the crystal ball of their lives when you look at their record. They cannot and will not stop hurting women. Period. Susan dealt with what happened to her in the stress and fallout from the trial by continuing to use drugs. Yet, she maintained contact with her family and soon returns to Aberdeen for one of her sister's weddings. This is around the same time John Robinson is sentenced. So she is going through a higher level of stress, anticipating court. When Robinson is sentenced, Susan shows up, only to be re-victimized by the scumbag during an outburst in the courtroom as John Robinson threatens to kill her and her family, which in turn initiates a set of circumstances Robyn Peery is still trying to understand to this day.
In February 91, she came back to Aberdeen for one of our sister's weddings. She seemed fairly normal, other than drugs, but she seemed fairly normal. March 91, at the end of March when she comes home, which now I know from his paperwork and the timeline, she had gone to his March sentencing early in the month. That's when he threatens her in open court and says, I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm going to break every bone in your face. I'm going to have your daughter, your family killed, whatever. And then the very last weekend of March, it was Easter weekend, a friend brought her home. She'd called my mom a few days before and said, can you see if you can get Becky? I want to see Becky. So she comes home for that weekend. We got Becky for one of those days. And Susan was very different than she had been in February. This visit, she had these absolutely massive meltdowns that one of them, I was home alone, mom was at work, and I go to walk into the kitchen and I see her in there. She's standing up, but she's completely doubled over. And she was absolutely bawling. I mean, sobbing. And I could feel it. The sense of dread that I could feel was so strong. I went into my bedroom and I sat on my bed and I cried because I thought, oh my God, it was horrible feeling, horrible. So I waited because, I was still young. I was only 22. I didn't know about this kidnap and rape yet. So I didn't have context other than, Susan's an addict, but I'd never seen her be this way. So I just didn't know. And I don't believe that she had even told my mom. So she'd gone through the trial and everything by herself because she was ashamed of what happened.
You hear that? Susan was ashamed of being victimized by the sociopath who kidnapped, raped, and tortured her. And, I might add, had kidnapped another woman near the same time he had abducted Susan. In fact, Susan was so ashamed, she had not told her family about what happened in real time, meaning they were unaware until the case was concluded against Robinson. And this is why I say law enforcement partly plays a role, even if it's subliminal, in what will soon happen. Mainly for not making Susan feel safe, protected, getting her help, making sure she knew nobody was accusing her of any wrongdoing or that none of it was her fault. During that stay at her parents' house, not long after Susan broke down, she regains her composure and approaches Robyn with a question.
I know the last day that she was there, which would have been the next day, she took a big bath and did all that stuff and then said, "Can you fix my hair for me? You've always been really good fixing hair." So I said, "Yeah, so she sits on the toilet lid and I'm curling her hair. And I think we just got to have sister conversation for once we hadn't had in a long time. I do remember asking her if she would just stay. Why don't you just stay here and let, your friend who brought her, let him go back?" And she's like, "Well, I can't. I have to go back." And I didn't understand why she had to go back, Anyway, so half hour or so, she gets ready to leave and steps out on the front porch and turns around and looks at me. And I just said, "Please don't go. I love you." And she said, "I love you too, honey. I have to go," And I can still remember that look, just that last look, in each other's eyes for a few seconds and just think, "Please don't go," But she left. On the way out of Aberdeen, they stopped at my mom's work, and I think she might have gotten some money from Mom. And my mom said she got the same sense, just "Please don't go, please don't go." Asked her to stay, said, "Just stay. We'll go in a few days. We'll borrow a truck from someone in the family and go get whatever things you have. Whatever, just stay here." And she said Susan started crying. So Susan, she left. I don't believe Mom talked to her again after that. I'm not positive, but I do know at some point she found out about the kidnap and rape. She did find out about that. She did find out that Susan had gone through the trial by herself and that we had been threatened. What I don't know is if Susan had called, within a day or two and let her know that's what was going on and that she had to go back. But I know that she said, "I have to go back because if I don't, someone has threatened to kill you guys."
Susan felt that she needed to finish what she'd started with John Robinson, the family later believed, after they found out she had been raped and kidnapped. But was Susan referring to something else with that comment to Robyn? When she came home, Susan was with a man she had met in Yakima. They were friends, Robyn says, nothing more. The guy kind of took care of Susan and made sure she always had a safe enough place to stay, even if it was inside the van he drove around in. But something was definitely on Susan's mind, I think, beyond John Robinson. Something new was dragging her down. Let's take a break here. There's still so much to understand about the events taking place after Susan heads back to Yakima with the guy in the van and soon disappears. Head over to patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps and sign up for my free content page, where I'll be interacting with you, doing live streams, posting exclusive content, sending out newsletters, and dropping a major limited series podcast exclusively for Patreon members later this year. That's patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. Missing person cases can at times be like wading through muddy water, not knowing what's important before you find it. Generally, there is so little to go on when a person is here one day and gone the next. You are navigating your way on a road without directions or a map. It's frustrating and makes you feel helpless. Susan Marable had been a nurse. I have so much respect and admiration for nurses. They are the heartbeat, forgive the metaphor, of any hospital. The long hours, late shifts, thankless work, with people complaining all the time to you. They deserve our praise. This had been Susan's calling. It was nothing else she had ever wanted to do until, that is, an unfortunate set of circumstances, all of which were circumvented by the men in her life making poor choices, upended everything and threw her life into a whirlwind of dysfunction she could find no escape from. During her last visit home, Susan had said this: "I want to get better." She was tired of the life she had been leading. She wanted to change. She wanted to get her daughter back and start over. This was clear to Robyn. Despite her life choices and the addiction strangling her, Susan always called home. This is 1991, so it is the era of collect calls. Susan would phone and check in with her mom routinely. But leading up to April 23rd, 1991, after she heads back to Yakima with the van guy, those calls suddenly stop.
Next thing I know, my mom said, "We can't find Susan." And I'm like, "What do you mean? You can't find Susan?" I mean, it's like, I don't even, when that happens, you don't even know, what do you mean you can't find them? She said, "Well, the guy who brought her to Aberdeen called and said that the last day he saw her was April 23rd. And so Mom went over to Yakima on the 25th and filed a missing persons report. And that kind of just started everything.
That call from Susan's friend in Yakima and her mother's trip to file a missing persons report becomes full of unknowns. I asked Robyn what Susan's friend, the guy who had brought her to Aberdeen and was watching out for her, told the family about her disappearance. Look, he owned a van, he was deeply immersed in that world, and had met Susan the first time while soliciting her. And he clearly believed their relationship was more than friends.
Okay, so he was a loner. He lived in his 66 Ford van, and he met Susan at some point over there in Yakima. It was a date type of thing. And she was, homeless. So she ended up staying in his van with him. And in his mind, Susan was his girlfriend. He was very weird when he brought her that weekend, that, he wouldn't come in the house initially when he brought her to Aberdeen. And my mom was pretty savvy, and she's like, I got to get this guy in the house. I got to check him out. So finally, Susan gets him to come in. And I remember really zeroing in on this guy because he just gave me the creeps. Oh, just the creeps. He never even spoke a single word. I could smell him. I can remember that smell. He was older than her. He was about 42, if I remember. And she was 34. Very, very creepy. He told Mom, "I can't find her." And what the story was is that, she was staying in his van with him. They would park a couple blocks usually away from the YMCA because that was close to, showers and all those things. And he was doing some of the seasonal work at a place called Roche Fruit there in Yakima. So he had to go to sleep. So I guess, according to him, she said, "I'm going to walk downtown to the AM/PM mini mart." She was going to get a Pepsi and cigarettes or something. Just go ahead and just go to sleep, and then I'll be back, Well, apparently around midnight or so, he wakes up, she's not there. So he goes driving around all over. Can't find her. Looked around for the next couple days on the street, talking to all the other people out on the streets, other girls that Susan knew. None of them had seen her, didn't know where she was.
I wondered what the police told Susan's mother after days went by and there was no sign or word from Susan. It was as if she walked out into the night and into a portal. Gone. Poof. Vanished.
After my mom went there, the initial detective on the case, the very first detective on the case, told my mother she probably just took off somewhere to party. She'll be back in a couple days. This is what these people do. These people. And, but he filed the report because she came there and, this is the mom. But they never did any formal questioning of anybody. Nobody. Not even the guy she was with. Since then, I've met one of these women who was a friend of Susan's back in the day. And she's clean and sober and helps women in these situations now. And she told me, she said, yeah, they never talked to, she said if they saw us out on the street, they might roll down the window and go, hey, have you seen Susan? Nope. That was it. That was an interview.
You've heard me say this before, but until there is change, I will repeat it. We see it in case after case when working girls go missing. Their disappearances are treated differently by law enforcement because of their life choices. They are, in many ways, blamed. It was prevalent in 1991, in 1971, in 1981, and still is to this day. So Susan's family takes it upon themselves to begin searching for her.
Yeah, I still have my mom's original flyers from back in the day. My mom spent about 4.5 months going back and forth over there until, winter comes and she can't get over the pass. She took a family member's RV and stayed over there for 2 weeks, and she would walk the streets. She rode around with the guy in his van, got all of Susan's belongings from him, which I have now. He took her all the places he knew Susan liked to go, down by the river, because, she was the nature girl. She went in taverns. I mean, oh God, the place, some of the areas there are so dangerous. And this one tavern, the Blue Banjo, I remember seeing it years ago being in Yakima and then hearing about it through the years. The place was so notoriously dangerous. It was meant for a certain crowd of people, and that's it. You didn't go in there. My mom went in there, of course, though. And she bought people beers, and she started asking questions. I have all of her original notebooks where she wrote down people's names, any little tips they gave her, all of that. Yeah, my mom just pounded the pavement. And then she took all her stuff back to the YPD, to the detectives, and said, here's my notebooks. And they said, we don't want it. And she's like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you don't know what you're doing. And she said, I'm doing what you're not. I'm looking for my daughter. And these are the names of people I've talked to. They never did anything with it. Nothing. They wouldn't even take it. I still have it because they never took it.
If any of you have listened to season 1 of my narrative podcast, Paper Ghosts, that story of a mother relentlessly searching for her missing daughter, right down to conducting an investigation herself and trying to convince law enforcement to listen, will be familiar. It is a common story I hear in missing person cases. Robyn has shown me some of her mother's notes and other materials from the family search and investigation. It's alarming to me, very sad, heartbreaking actually, and also so very telling of our culture to see this stuff and sense the pain of a mother doing anything she can to find her child and running into a brick wall with law enforcement who just don't seem to give a shit. Yet we see time and again a white girl from an affluent family in a posh suburb go missing, and they call in the cavalry and stop at nothing to find answers as cable TV locks in and brings us the entire show 24/7. It's disgusting and truly shows who we are.
The prevailing attitude of the time, I have a friend who's a reporter over there with the Yakima Herald-Republic. She's written several articles for me for Susan's case, so she knows a lot of the former law enforcement and the current. And she said from one retired detective, and I can't remember his name, he's written some books even, but he was around back in the day, and he told her the prevailing attitude was, these guys are almost doing us a favor. And so just nothing was done. And these kind of predators like Keith Jesperson and all those guys, it was easy prey for them, easy pickings, and they knew it, especially if they're passing through.
You would think with the amount of serial killer activity in the Pacific Northwest at the time, law enforcement would have showed more concern over Susan's case, if only to track down a serial killer. Because that is, of course, my first thought. Happy Face, Keith Jesperson, was active out there then. Green River, a more obscure name, Scott William Cox, and a host of other serial murderers. And these guys preyed pretty much exclusively on women in Susan's position. I am confident after interviewing Happy Face, Keith Jesperson, for the 12 years that I did, that he was not in the area at the time, and his trucking logs seem to back that up. Still, any number of scenarios could have taken place, including the threat John Robinson made directly to Susan during his court case. He was in jail at the time she went missing, but his brother, another frickin' loser, was not. And soon, a report comes in that Susan was last seen getting into a maroon-colored truck in the back of a bar. And wouldn't you know, John Robinson's brother owns the very same style and color truck. This one is running a little bit long, so I'm forced to take another break. Sorry. When we come back, I'll get into all of this with Robyn and where the case stands now, which will make your blood boil. I think that's a saying we don't use much anymore. It's old school. Make your blood boil. Be right back. As she grew into an adult, Robyn Peery picked up her mother's determination to see a resolution and find Susan. And for the past 23 years, Robyn has spent just about every free moment trying to find those answers. And again, if you've heard season 1 of Paper Ghosts, I tell the same story with 3 sisters of the 3 missing kids in that case. So I asked Robyn what she uncovered throughout the past 2+ decades, and what it is that has inspired her to keep going and going beyond the obvious, that Susan is her sister.
Well, I was able to rule out the guy she was staying with because for many years I got hung up on him, which is, I think, the first natural because he's the last person to see her as far as we know. So I had to really work through that by, I called his sister a few years ago. I just cold called her, and I'd been pushing the police for years to talk to him. And they just kept saying, well, we just don't think. And I'm like, but have you talked to him? Anyway, I finally got someone to try and contact him in 2018. And that detective talked to him and said, yeah, I just don't get the feeling that he had anything to do with it. And, I wasn't satisfied with his answer. So I just kind of kept pushing. And then I finally started writing letters because I found out he left Washington in 2019 and moved to Minnesota, where his family's originally from. So I hunted him down there and started writing him letters. And then I started calling him. And the first call, we talked for 3.5 hours. And he got really emotional and said he wished he knew whatever happened to her, that he really loved her, all these kinds of things. And I asked him all kinds of questions, because I was trying to lead him in a sense to are you sure you don't remember what happened? Since then, we've talked a dozen times. So I sent him cards. He's now in a nursing home situation in Minnesota because I had to track him down again because he moved and I couldn't contact him. So I found him again a few months ago. And so I call every once in a while and we talk, and he really likes that. And so a few months ago, I sent him a picture of Susan and one of her and her daughter. And it's just, I told the detective, I said, there's no way it's him. There's just no way. I said, he's not evasive at all. He tells me the same stuff all the time. So now it's been a few years. He's been telling me the same thing. I wish I knew what happened. She went to go down to the store. And if he killed my sister, why say anything? The only thing he's guilty of is being weird. He's just kind of a weird guy. And I think now I can look back, almost 34 years and go, I was 22 years old. Yeah, he was a creepy guy. I didn't know about people like that live in their vans and pick up women. I didn't know about those kind of people. So what I think now is that he felt comfortable around women like that. He's not a drug user, other than like maybe smoking weed. He wasn't using drugs with them, but he felt comfortable with them. He's a loner, and he's just a weird old man who has a little chihuahua, and he lives in a place where they...
I'm a little more suspicious of the guy, but I can understand why Robyn feels this way. Yet until there are answers, he has to be included in the suspect pool and penciled in near the top of that list. After his release from prison in 1997, Susan's rapist, John Robinson, was civilly committed under the determination that he is a sexually violent predator, having not even served his entire sentence. Then Robinson was released from the commitment center in February 2019 and moved out near Tacoma, Washington. And of course, John Robinson violated the terms of his release and was returned to the center about 8 weeks later. Because deviants like John Robinson, they do not change or learn from punishment. Robinson died in 2020 and cannot harm another female. Yakima police never interviewed John Robinson's brother, who drove the same type of maroon pickup Susan was seen getting into on the same night she disappeared. And what's even more frustrating about this guy is that when Robyn locked onto him some years back, law enforcement said they had no idea where he was, and so they couldn't talk to him. So Robyn called the Attorney General's office and asked them to find John Robinson's brother. They responded by saying they had no idea where he was. Robyn searched and searched, and then one day found out that John Robinson's brother had died way back in 1992. And nobody in law enforcement knew it. I must say, based on everything Robyn has told me, and she would absolutely agree, I think, nobody in law enforcement is investigating her sister's disappearance today, and nobody has really investigated the case for the past 30 plus years. They've done the absolute minimal amount of work possible. They just don't give a shit. And that is so damn obvious. As of today, no one is actively investigating Susan's case. She is still missing, and law enforcement has given up. That's the cold, hard truth. You call Yakima, and they will tell you it's an open case, and we are looking into it. Yeah, right. Robyn recently contacted a sergeant over there in Yakima and wanted to know if they had any plans on investigating Susan's case, or had it been designated into the cold case graveyard forever. What he tells her is, well, rather surreal and kind of unbelievable.
So I call the sergeant, and this is the first time I've ever been treated this way. The guy picked up the phone, and I knew immediately by his tone of voice he didn't want to talk to me. And he said, "Listen, I'm going to stop you right now before you even start going, because I can tell you're one of those people who's going to go on and on and on." And my mouth was hanging open. And I said, "I just wanted to kind of give you the rundown on my sister's case, and that this guy, I found him, and we need to interview him. I mean, the guy's getting old, right? It's, 2024. Listen, I'm not going to be your sounding board for something that happened 30 years ago." And I said, "What? Are you serious?" I mean, in my mind, I'm just thinking, I said, "I just want someone to go talk to this guy. We need to either be able to rule him out or whatever." And he said, "Well, you know what? If you would just let me get off the phone, I'm trying to do you a favor." And so I thought, okay, Robyn, don't blow your top. So I kept myself in check, and I said, "You know something? You could really stand to learn what empathy is and how to deal with people like me." And I said, "You know something? You should probably be a traffic cop. You don't have any business in this type of position at all." So I hung up with him and called professional standards and filed a formal complaint. I've never had anyone be like that.
I know cold case detectives all over this country, good men and women who work cases with families in mind. In that role as a cold case detective, you need to be able to take one to the chin every once in a while from a family member. You need to allow families to vent their frustration. Beat your ass up. Talk about how they are feeling. And by far, you need, as Robyn says, empathy. It is part of the job. These families have no answers. Their lives are in purgatory. They do not know what happened to a loved one and realize they may never know. They wake up with the shit and they go to sleep at night with it. It only takes a little bit of humanity to listen and to do the job you are being paid to do. I asked Robyn what she thinks happened to her sister.
Well, the thing that's so difficult is because of where she was in her life and being an addict, it's one of a couple things. It is either that someone avenged John Robinson, which would most likely be his brother, or she went out that night, walked down to the street, and just someone coming through.
I wondered if it was possible Susan had had enough of this life and went off into the night and committed suicide. You have to ask that question. Robyn said not a chance. If she had done that, I think, too, her body would have been found. If you have any information about this case, contact me and I can put you in touch with Robyn. I will not give out the number to a police department who has so glibly snubbed their noses to Susan's family, doesn't care, and would employ on staff a detective who would say this to the sister of a missing person.
One detective told me she was a throwaway.
A human being, a daughter, sister, mother, friend, a throwaway. Disgraceful and disturbing and disgusting to me. There are investigators in the world out there thinking in this manner. If that is where you are in life and work, get the hell out of law enforcement and get yourself some help. That's it for this week. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for this episode include Susan Marable, Still Missing, 27 Years After, by Juliette Muir, NBC News, April 9, 2018. The NamUs website, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. And of course, my interviews with Robyn Peery and the abundance of research she shared with me. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.